David Spencer is a former Detective Chief Inspector for the Met Police, and he's now Head of Crime and Justice for the Policy Exchange think tank. David Spencer, a very good afternoon to you.
Afternoon.
We've detailed some standout things that we think are important. Talk us through what you think are the main points of these statistics.
Well, I think there's probably three major stories in the data today, and you've touched on some of them. So first of all, property crime. We're seeing some really big increases here. So over the last year, shoplifting is up 20%. That's the highest that's ever been recorded. We've had robbery against businesses, which is up 50%. And theft person offences, which, as you said, are sort of things like pickpocketing and having your phone snatched out of your hand, that's up 34%. So the first story here is there's a significant increase in property crime. The second is the massive increase in fraud. So there was 4.2 million instances of fraud estimated last year, and that's up 31%. And we've been seeing that progressively over the last couple of years track upwards. So fraud is a major problem. And then the third thing about violent crime is that we've seen the last few years a lot of violent crimes on the increase since the pandemic, but that seems to be stabilising. So just to give you a sense, though, over the last 10 years, knife crime has increased by about 78% over the last decade. We're now starting to see that looks like it's stabilised. So they seem to me the big points that we can take from the data today.
And one other one that I do want to add into this, and then we will start talking about all of these things. 1 in 10 people have experienced some form of domestic abuse, sexual assault or stalking. It is the first time an estimate has been made of the kind of combined prevalence of all of these. Do we benefit from putting all of those things together? Don't we get a better picture and a better understanding of the crimes if we keep those figures separate?
So the data has been published. Actually, it is in quite a bit of detail for the first time today, and it's all credit to those that work on this sort of stuff, that they have actually broken it down in detail. So I can pick some of the data out of there. For example, if we look at domestic abuse, we see that about 7.8% of adults have been victims of domestic abuse in the last year. And within that 7.8%, 9.1% of women who are adults have been victims of domestic abuse, and 6.5% of men who are adults have been victims of domestic abuse. So we can see a really clear split between men and women there in terms of the prevalence. And when we look at sexual abuse offences as well, or allegations and offences and these sorts of things, we've seen some quite significant increases. The numbers look small, but actually when you look at them carefully, they're quite big increases. So in 2015, 1.7% of adults had been victims of sexual offences. By 2025, so 10 years later, 2.4% had. So actually, that move between 1.7 and 2.4 is a pretty significant increase in prevalence in the last 10 years.
Right, it certainly is. I mean, it's an awful lot of individual lives really horrendously affected by that kind of crime, isn't it? Can we ever know, you know way more about policing and crime than we do, how much of these rises are because the perpetrators of these crimes simply know that they are less likely to be investigated, less likely to be caught in the first place? The crime, is less likely to result in their prosecution.
It's difficult to know with any certainty. I mean, one thing that we do know, and we've looked at this at Policy Exchange, is so what do the public want on when it comes to crime and policing and criminals? And one of the things that we found is that, and the first bit isn't that surprising, but the second bit is, so actually across every group, people want the police and the criminal justice system to be tougher on crime. That perhaps isn't a surprise. What is a surprise is when you look at the breakdown of the data, that is amongst every demographic group. So every age group, men and women, every economic group, every ethnicity, actually supporters of every single political party, from Reform and the Conservative Party through to the Liberal Democrats and the Greens, supporters of every political party want the police and the criminal justice system to be tougher on crime. So there is certainly a perception out there at the moment that the system is not working on behalf of the law-abiding public in the way the public would want it to work.
And it is also undoubtedly sending a message to would-be criminals that you can indulge in some of this activity and it's extremely likely that nothing will happen. The number of crimes going unsolved is over 2 million from these statistics, isn't it?
That's right. And one of the interesting things is that we now see, because of the backlogs in the court system, particularly the Crown Court system, so we're well over now 70,000 cases backlogged in the Crown Courts. And we're seeing cases that are listed for trial in 2029, so 4 years away before a case gets to trial in front of a judge and a jury. And the reality is that if you are someone who is awaiting a trial, then you might previously have pleaded guilty, but actually you're going to give it a run and plead not guilty on this occasion, because you'll probably hope that within 4 years, the victims and the witnesses will have all given up and decided not to give evidence. And I would be surprised if that wasn't happening. So the backlogs in the Crown Court are a really serious problem that needs to be fixed.
Do you also think that ministers, and both Tory and Labour, because, a lot of these statistics would refer back to the repercussions of a previous government, perhaps if I can put it that way, that the governments here have seen the headline trends going down and have missed the point that more corrosive forms of crime were starting to rise?
I think that's probably right, actually. I think there was a lot of people in sort of policy-making circles and policing itself who were feeling pretty good about seeing the headline rates of crime on the crime survey go down, while there was these sort of bubbling under these trends underneath the headline were heading in the other direction. And I think one of the things I would say is that the policy preference for relying on rehabilitation and prevention, as important as those things are, if you don't actually focus on enforcement and enforcing the law, and particularly when you're talking about the most prolific offenders, then you are never going to solve these problems. And when we look at the data, again, we can see that actually when we think about the most prolific offenders, they don't even go to prison, even after they've convicted 75 previous convictions. And the reality is, if you're not willing to send to prison people who are committing more than 75 criminal convictions, then there really is a problem in terms of who it is we're targeting, because these people are committing more and more crime all the time.
Do you think that the police have missed taking the right direction of travel too?
I think that it's difficult to say that the answer to that isn't yes. There are 1,500 fewer police officers now than there were a year ago, and there are no doubt sort of challenges within the criminal justice system that are broader than just the police. But the reality is that there are a lot of the sorts of crimes that we're talking about. Shoplifting is a really good example of this, where the police have chosen to focus on other things, have decided that shoplifting actually isn't that much of a priority. And you could say the same of fraud as well, actually. The police and the law enforcement system hasn't really yet worked out how to tackle fraud in an effective way. And what we see with this is when the police don't focus on certain types of crime, fraud and shoplifting in this example, those crimes go up.
Yeah. So what can we do? I mean, apart from hoping to double the size of the police force, which ain't going to happen, just hope that people believe in a criminal justice system that will catch up with them. That is a way off too. What do we do?
Yeah, well, I don't think this is a case for abandoning all hope. I do think that there are opportunities for optimism here. So first of all, we know that most crime is committed by a relatively small number of people. And if the police and the criminal justice system target those people relentlessly, those prolific criminals who are committing 75, 100 previous convictions, which we saw in previous research that we've done at Policy Exchange, then we could have a major outsized impact on the rates of crime, particularly things like robbery, and shoplifting. So that would be the first thing. The second thing I would say is there are locations where crime is more prevalent, and the police could be doing much more around targeting those locations as well. So I think by looking at locations and individuals where criminals and crime is more prolific, then there are things we can do. And the other thing is we've got to move these people through the Crown Court system more rapidly. So if there was a place for investment within the criminal justice system, it would have to be around making sure we move these people through the court system more quickly.
Keir Starmer is worried about a summer of unrest. Other politicians are saying there will definitely be a summer of unrest. How ready do you think the police force is to cope with that?
Well, the real question is behind that is what changes have the police made in the last year? So there is a widespread recognition that the police were too slow to act in response to disorder that was happening last year. And the question is, have the police actually changed their systems and processes to be ready to direct significant police and public order resources to the locations that need them? At the moment, I think that is still to be proven. I have had conversations with very senior police officers who say they are ready, but we won't know until the moment comes. So it will be a point of, I know it is a significant point of concern within policing and within senior people in politics, but we won't know for sure until or if those instances take hold. So we'll just have to wait and see. But they're certainly aware of it, and they say they're ready.
Right. OK, well, we absolutely will wait and see on that one. Thank you for your time. That's David Spencer, former Chief Inspector for Metropolitan Police, and also Head of Crime and Justice for the Policy Exchange think tank.